Hello, hello. How is everyone doing? Just here for the live. So hopefully I can see you all join in. Definitely wanting to just share our story. If you saw my post earlier, this was all about the story of what's going on in Cobb. If you haven't heard it yet, there's certainly been I talk a lot about the community, and for some that haven't been a part of everything that has transpired over the last several years, you may be wondering what that even means and what community am I referring to, and what kind of challenges have we been going through. And so I wanted to take a moment to just share how we got to where we are today and what even is today. I mean, the summary of it all is depending on a decision at the Supreme Court, my current elected position can be immediately ended, not by choice, but just a forced vacancy. And that decision is going to impact other electeds all across the state of Georgia. And so this is a fight that has been going on for at least the last couple of years. But like I said, I wanted to take a moment to share our story because so many different communities, different organizations, people, we have these conversations privately, in chapter meetings, in private chats, in Google Meets and Zoom calls. And so I wanted to bring the conversation to the social world and share it with you all and let you know what's going on, and also want to hear your feedback, want to hear your thoughts. What do you think it should be done, or how you think it affects you? I also want to hear from my community. How are you feeling? Yeah, I do get a chance to hear from you all in our huddles and in our different conversations that we may have, whether it be an official capacity or even in a friendly capacity. And I will say that it has always been encouraging for me to speak with you all. And so, like I said, this is that chance to hear from everybody, but also share our stories. I hope that as we go, you'll also be helping me share our story, because it is our story. It's happening to me. It's happening to our district. It's happening to the county, and certainly it's bleeding over into a future impact to the state. So I'll begin with just talking a little bit about 2020, and it was a historic win. It was a major year for districts all across the state, from a partisan perspective. The Democrats did take the lead and flipped a lot of seats. Several counties actually also flipped in terms of representation. And there was a lot of excitement for what that new direction could mean. And this is, like I said, not to necessarily hone in on the partisan side of it all, but that is an important backdrop for everything that has happened. In my particular race, it was an uphill battle. Okay, it was. I currently represent Newt Gingrich's district. It's a very, very mixed community in terms of political persuasion, age, gender, just professional experience, socioeconomic, demographic data. All of those different things make up the diversity of the district that I currently represent. And if you don't know what that is the Battery area, Vining, Smyrna, East Cobb. It's an incredible area, including a heavy population of veterans. There are so many different issues as well that are a challenge for the district. And so it's also a place that I've called home for almost 20 years now. And the election night was amazing, right? We pulled off this upset. It was a very close race. I was up against who I refer to as a Cobb success story, a strong Republican, very engaged in the party as well, and has done well for himself and his family, continues to as well. but it was definitely an upset. I did not raise the same kind of money. I didn't have the same kind of clout or the same kind of backing, but we talked about real issues and to real people. And we presented a vision for the community as well. And that particular year was filled with all kinds of interesting politics, if you can recall, 2020 as well. And so the momentum was on our side, and we were able to cross that finish line and just really propel ourselves into the office and begin to set this standard of transparency and visibility with our office. And that is the dog in the background. I guess he wants to be a part of the conversation too, but it's Max. But anyway, it was very exciting and definitely not expected, but we did it. And we set out with all kinds of great goals for the office, bringing a lot of different people to the table, moving the needle on all kinds of policies and initiatives. At the same time, there was certainly some frustration with the results of that election year, not just in Cobb, but in several counties within the state. And if you're not familiar with the county government, there are 159 counties here in Georgia. And you've got different layers of government. So we always talk about the checks and balances between the judicial and the executive and the legislative branch. When it comes to county government, you got to think of the federal, the state, the county, and the city. There are a few other pieces as well to how our government is structured, but there's checks and balances that exist amongst the layers of government as well. Something to note, though, is we were also at the period of time where the census was completed and the state legislature was tasked with drawing new maps. So which new maps? A lot of times we talk a lot about the congressional maps, but there are many maps that our state legislature is responsible for putting together. And so knowing this, we were gearing up for what the new maps would be after 2020. So state legislature has to draw the congressional maps, the Public Service Commission maps, the state legislative maps. So this includes the state Senate and the state reps, the state house. It includes the commission districts. It includes some of the cities. However, cities can draw their own maps. So they kind of bring those maps to the state as well. They work in conjunction. They also have to draw school board maps. So you can imagine 159 counties, all of these different seats, a new map for every single thing at a minimum every 10 years. That's a lot of maps. And so the state of Georgia set up this process that they normally follow, where what's known as the local delegation, these are also state reps, but they just represent different jurisdictions. These state reps go ahead and hold on, I'm trying to see if I can see any comments because I can't see comments from you guys yet. But the state reps are responsible in the local areas, are responsible for drawing the maps for the delegations that they sit on. So just to give you an idea of what that means, let's pretend you're a state rep and you have a little bit of Cobb County and a little bit of Fulton County. As a state rep, you would sit on both the Cobb County local delegation and you would sit on the Fulton County local delegation. And so when it comes to passing local bills, you would be a part of drawing or creating bills that pertain only to Fulton County or only to Cobb County. You would be permitted to participate with that and vote on that as a local jurisdiction. But mind you, these are still state reps. These are not commission. These are not county representatives. They are state representatives. So in that local delegation, they take these maps, they draw them, and the local delegation will pass what's known as a local bill, specifically for the commission seats and for the school board seats. And so after they pass those local bills, they then go to the General Assembly, meaning everyone else gets to vote on them. So just to make sure that someone in Savannah isn't drawing the maps for someone in Cobb County, that's really the respect of the local delegations, because you really want to care about the areas that you actually represent. And so they drew those maps and they're able to flow normally. Well, in this particular cycle, after 2020, a unique process was used. these state representatives, a couple of state representatives in the counties that switched in partisan representation, instead of going through the local delegation, they went directly to the General Assembly and filed those bills as general bills as opposed to local bills. And it has caused quite a bit of problem. So in Cobb County's case, particularly, it hinged on what we are now confronting as a near constitutional crisis. That is what's currently in existence in Cobb County. And that is the fight that has been going on for a couple of years now. So when this map got drawn, bypassing the local delegation, it drew my house out of the district. And where that became a real problem is that commissioners are elected to 4-year terms. And so what it set the pretext or the context for is that if the map came into effect, if it got passed, then I would be in violation of the residency requirements according to state law as well. And my 4-year term would be immediately ended as a result of that new map. So you might be wondering, how does that happen? Well, can't you serve out your term? Well, et cetera, et cetera. And what I can share with you all is that we don't have on record it happening ever before in the state of Georgia. So it posed a bit of a what do we do now scenario in the case that that bill passed. So knowing what it could mean that I could be elected and then immediately removed from office at no fault of my own, but just because a map was drawn, we went down to the Capitol to inquire why, what is the point of this map? And certainly there were different pieces of rationale that was shared with me, including why don't I just move back to another area, back to the South Side is actually what I was told, that that's where I should be. And the question was then followed up with, can you even remove a sitting commissioner? With no real answer, because there was no precedent for it happening before. And instead of revisiting that map or working as a local delegation, it was pushed forward and not questioned further. And the map passed. That map passed and became the map by which the elections were conducted for that year. And it began a shot clock because the map would become effective at 12:01, 2023. And you're probably wondering, well, aren't you still here? Aren't you still serving as a commissioner? Well, a lot happened between that map being passed and today. And we're still in that fight right now. But what's at stake is that something that few people really have been able to grasp is that maps can be drawn at any time, meaning it's not limited to redistricting years, the bare minimum of redistricting. Not only can maps be passed at any time, it's now been shown that it's completely valid to bypass local delegations and go straight to the General Assembly, which means if my seat becomes, if I am forced out, if none of the things that we've been able to do between what happened then and today can win, then an entirely new era of politics opens up in the state of Georgia, where any elected official can be removed at any time. And that was the reality that Cobb County had to face back in 2022 as this shot clock began. And certainly faced with a lot of different questions at that point in time, one of the things that I wanted to do was lean into my community. I wanted to make sure that everybody could understand what was happening. We had meetings as families, as just members of the community. And it was meant to really just discuss what the different facts were, what the different legal components were, how the maps could work, all the different pieces. And certainly there was an interest in Cobb County to prevent what we perceived to be chaos on how we could even operate as a county. And so in that, there was a discovery of a provision inside of the Constitution known as home rule. And this is something that was further codified in 83. That is our more recent version of our Constitution. And upon consulting a lot of different members who were actually a part of those debates when home rule was being crafted, the thought was that home rule was there to protect the county when it came to encroachment, or it served as a check and balance when there wasn't proper conversation between the two layers of government. So that's kind of where we are, but I really can't see some of the questions. So I'm trying to make sure I have these. All right, I have a few. Okay, any county every year, that's right. And so people wonder about this fight. Why are we still fighting for it? It's because it's not about fighting for my seat. It certainly is happening to me. I guess I pulled the short straw on that. But this is about every seat. And our community is fighting for every seat in the state of Georgia. It's for the future of how our government can continue to function. So let's talk about what happened since that map got passed in the state legislature. Well, we looked at home rule, and in home rule, it specifies that the county government, a local jurisdiction, can amend or repeal any local bill. And when we look at a map by definition is a local bill. Now, there are some restrictions for what home rule can and cannot be used for. And in order to understand what each one of those exclusions are, we had to look at the dictionary and understand the case law that was tied to the meaning of those words at the time that they were written. And so it was in the opinion of the county that home rule could be applied to this map. Now, it wasn't that the county could just draw a map. That wasn't anything that we actually did. What we did do, though, is our actual local delegation, the state reps that represent Cobb County, they had also drawn a map that didn't get to see the light of day. And that map went through the apportionment committee, went through the apportionment office, which is what is required by our Constitution, that any drawn map has to go through the apportionment office. And then there are some other opportunities that different groups can go about creating a map, but that is one of the primary ways. And so what we had before us as a county commission was the existence of two different maps. We had the existence of the General Assembly map, which had a bill number, and we had the existence of the local delegations map. And the local delegations map actually followed the normal process, whereas the General Assembly's map did not. And so as a Board of Commissioners, what we did at the end of that year was we invoked home rule to amend the map that the General Assembly passed. We amended it with the bill that the local delegation had put together and got a bill number 4. And so as a county, we didn't draw a map, but we did provide a vehicle by which local delegations around the state of Georgia could be empowered and not be thwarted by other representatives from other areas that may have their own motivations for what may occur in a particular county. And so after we invoked home rule, the shot clock hit midnight, and on January 1 of the following year, I was still serving. And the county is still operating currently under the map that was invoked with home rule. And there is a back and forth between the home rule map and the state map, and that came a little bit later. But at that time, that's what was occurring. And we followed every part of the home rule procedure properly. It's a very strong power that counties have. It can only be used in certain situations, and there's a very specific process that counties have to follow in order to invoke it. And so that's what we did. Fast forward, at the same time, there was also an effort, because remind you, this is all predicated on these counties flipping representation and the desire to grab that power back. At the same time, there were also several cityhood movements happening concurrently. There were actually two that took place in my district that year, by which the community educated themselves on what the impact of becoming a city would be, both to taxes and to zoning and all kinds of other pieces tied to that. And so it was incredibly tough dealing with the amount of misinformation that circulated during that time period. But nonetheless, the community prevailed. And one of the areas where disinformation circulated rapidly, it got beat out, I believe 72%. And we kind of joke around now that, I don't think there's anything that East Cobb agrees to at 72%. But it was the city of Vinings and the city of East Cobb that were on the ballot for District 2. And so all of that was happening in the backdrop of these new maps being drawn to force me out of office. And in addition to that, there were several other things that occurred that year. The same state legislator that drafted the map that drew my house out of the district, after we invoked home rule, attempted to pass around seven different tries, state legislative bills to also get me out of office, to reaffirm the Constitution and their understanding of it, to reassert a map that the state had originally passed, to overturn what the county did in home rule, all the way down to the last day of session, trying to attach it to a leaf blowing bill as well. Again, all power grabs, 7 different times. So we're going through now the bills themselves, the state legislative bills, the cityhood movements, and then you throw on top of that, because I decided to create an organization. I didn't run it, but I created it and put some members of the community. I put them in to do what they do in a fantastic way to help educate people on the nuances of all of this stuff. I put some money into it, but because it existed and because I founded it, someone decided to also claim an ethics or put an ethics complaint against me as well for doing that, which also got defeated, overturned unanimously by the ethics board. But all of this in the backdrop. And then, in addition to the ethics complaint, there were several lawsuits filed. Primarily the same lawsuit, but retried multiple times, 4 different times. And some of the things you can't even make up. I mean, honestly, it's probably worth even more conversation on that. But one of the lawsuits, or the very first one that was filed, it took 3 times to achieve standing by the members who were bringing the suit against the county. And they were suing the county to say, we don't think that home rule is constitutional. And so therefore, you need to revoke what you invoked, and that commissioner there needs to go. And so the first lawsuit, we go to the courtroom, and I mean, I kid you not, there was even one part where the attorney turns around and looks at everybody. He says, look, I don't know what you guys have going on in Cobb. I'm not trying to remove a commissioner. I mean, I live in Gwinnett. Can't make it up. It was an interesting hearing. But that was the first try. And then there was a second try to file that. And then that one was withdrawn. And then they tried again on the third time. And it was just this real crazy interplay with regards to the different lawsuits. So finally, one of them they received the standing in order to continue on with the suit, so that the actual constitutional question could be litigated. And this was all in the Cobb Superior Court, which is it's the lower court. So you think of Superior, and then there's appeals in the Supreme Court. So that case is currently in the Supreme Court, which, like I said, I'll get to. But in the lower court, sorry, just looking at some of the comments here. And guys, if you have questions, I'm here. 73% opposition. Okay, appreciate the correction on that one. Can't forget those numbers. But when with this last lawsuit, also can't make this up. Fani Willis comes out with the list of all those that are indicted. And one of those members, one of those individuals, is the attorney on the case against the county right now, which certainly creates an interesting dynamic. But that case did finally get the standing, did get heard at the lower court. Thank you, Daryl. It did get heard at the lower court, and the lower court came back with their decision. And that decision came down just a little bit over a month ago, I want to say. It's like the second week of January. And they decided that home rule was unconstitutional, by which the county immediately filed an appeal. And that is just the natural course of legal work. So the appeal got filed Jan 8th. Thanks, Megan. Thank you. The appeal got filed, and what's known as a supersedious is what gets to function, gets to stay in place. And so that means that everything is kept status quo. So what's status quo? Status quo is the county's home rule map. Therefore, I'm able to still show up at board meetings and vote. And the only reason I'm able to still show up at board meetings and vote. And so that appeal is currently sitting with the Supreme Court, and they are hearing that case. It was then requested that that the case be expedited through the Supreme Court. And this is where we wind up getting closer to today, right? Because think about it, we've now gone through a whole year of cityhood movements, 7 state legislative bills, 4 lawsuits, an ethics complaint, all to try to get me out of office and get this partisan split going the way that I guess is desired. But now we're here. That decision sits with the Supreme Court to determine or evaluate whether or not the lower court if they agree with the lower court's decision, or if they have their own, they come to a different conclusion. And I keep looking down because I'm looking to see if there are any questions or if there's anything that anyone wants to comment on. But I appreciate you guys tuning in and just listening in. But point is, it's being heard right now. The expediting was granted. The calendar showed that the first set of responses were due on the 8th, second set on the 16th. And you can look all this up on the Georgia Supreme Court's website. It's all there. And then the third set of responses today. And the reason why today is such a special day is because, well, if the court decides that it's unconstitutional, then my seat will be immediately vacated. Not by choice, not at all. I love my community. I love the work I do. There's still so much work that we have to get done, that we are on target to complete. Same momentum that we had since day one. But all of that would become vacant, and then a special election would be called. And the reason for the request for it to be expedited was to make sure that a special could be called so that by May, there could be a seat filled and the person would be able to serve. So I would be kicked out of office, and then the seat would be filled with someone else, And we would just continue down this trajectory of some very strange politics here in Georgia. Honestly, my personal opinion is if my term is cut short just one day, we should be outraged, because there are some major ramifications for that statewide. That aside, today is a very special day for that reason. It's to make sure that a special could be called. And so then I learned recently that, and we're still trying to make sure that this is valid, but that if the seat isn't vacant by today, that a special can't be called at all. That if I'm kicked out of office, that this seat will sit vacant all the way through November. And so the question posed to me, or implied, was, what am I going to do? Am I going to preempt the Supreme Court's decision and just give up everything that our community has fought for, everything that's at risk for our future, to lay that at my feet, to be told I should just move? When this first happened, I don't belong in this community, I should just move to another community? For my community to be standing up and educating themselves so that they can be strong advocates and supporters when we're making these tough decisions, that we're carrying this burden because there are conflicts in state law, because the state election calendar can't get it right. I even asked the question, so if I got hit by a bus in a couple days, no special could be called? And the answer was yes. This is the problem. The problem is not me or Cobb or any of that. This is what happens when we disregard checks and balances. This is what happens when we disguise power grabs as ways to, justify doing what we want to do. And I've been encouraged because my community is so strong and they pour into me, they feed into me, because this has been a tough series of things over the last several years. And even despite all of this, we've still been one of the most productive commission offices. We've been able to achieve so much. And I owe that to the strength of this community. But I need these conversations now to not just exist amongst ourselves, because this impacts everyone in the state. These conversations need to be public. I want to hear what you think. I want to know how you feel. People want to know if I'm going to resign. I'm not resigning. We're not doing that. Not giving up. They may have drawn me out, but they cannot erase me. That won't happen. We have too much to say, too much work to do. And I refuse to believe that we are powerless, because, again, one of my favorite things to say, the greatest lie ever told is that we have no power. And if this story doesn't show you that when a community is together, educated, empowered because they understand the levers, that they can rise to any occasion and overcome it, I don't know what can. One of the other things I like to say is, in every challenge, you are confronted with a choice to you choose fear or love every time. And I refuse to let fear be the motivation for my choices. I love my community. I need you all. We need each other. And so that is my decision. and we will make this happen. And the Supreme Court hasn't finalized their decision yet. We will certainly be watching for that. But at the end of the day, our entire future is at stake. If any elected official can be forced out of office at any time, think about the ramifications of that. It won't be because someone wants someone to move. It might be because they don't want a certain company to move into an area, or maybe they don't want a certain grant to go into a certain area. None of that is okay. It defies representation. So certainly to my community, I'm asking you to share what you've shared with me privately, to share it publicly. If you're one of the ones that would lose representation, make it known. Let people know. Because not enough people know that this is happening. And right now you have some dedicated commissioners in Cobb County that are trying to hold it all together. You have some dedicated members of staff that are trying to hold it all together. Help them. Say it loudly. And I tell you, we'll win on the other side of this. But it has to be out there. I know we can do it. So I hope this is the beginning of a conversation, because there's so much more to unpack. These weren't the only things that happened after 2020 that were curious. There are a lot of things that can erode the stability of what we hold near and dear in our version of a democracy, our republic, our representative democracy. But if we don't feel bold enough and encouraged enough and in community enough to talk about it publicly, to stand on it loudly, to advocate for what we need to advocate for, then we will lose it all. That is a guarantee. We cannot be fearful. We must be hopeful. We can be hopeful even when things may feel hopeless. My community is there to remind me that every single time. When I feel down, they're there. And I thank them so much. So that is what I wanted to share with you all today. Like I said, probably do this, probably have another conversation as well, but I really want to hear back from you all. Share this, post it, post your story. Many of you have been in the trenches. Tell your story. Tell them the story of our community. Let it be a sign of hope that we're resilient. So thank you, everybody, so much. I appreciate you. And have a wonderful evening. You know how to find me if you need me. Good night. Thanks.